Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So I want to do a follow-up to the most recent video I did where I outlined some information that I've been receiving about impending increases in food and commodity prices, shortages, and supply chain disruptions, what it's going to mean for you, and how bad it could potentially get. For any new subscribers that we've gained as a result of the most recent video we put out, I would encourage you to please go and check out our library of hundreds of practical preparedness related videos. We walk the talk here, okay? It's not just about me getting up here and reading news articles and sharing my experiences in the industry with you. It's about actually getting out there and doing stuff, learning stuff, getting your resources squared away, getting prepared for when things get bad. Now, what do you think would happen if the government and the mainstream media mouthpieces came out tomorrow and said, you know what, we think there's going to be a food shortage in the near future, and we actually think that the price of food and commodities in general are going to skyrocket? What would happen? I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. Well, you don't need a few seconds because you know what would happen. People would lose their frickin' minds. The just-in-time delivery system would collapse probably within the span of a few days, and the shelves would be absolutely bare. This is the reason why that in the event of a national or even global emergency, the onus is going to be on you, the individual, to position yourself in advance of that type of scenario. So you don't have to be fed an endless conveyor belt of lies about how good the situation is and how you don't need to worry about it. Now, before I dive into this, I want to alleviate some anxiety because I do think some people are going a little bit overboard with this whole food shortage situation. What we are experiencing right now in North America and the developed world is not currently what I would call an existential food shortage or crisis, okay? The price of food may double, it may even triple, but I'm gonna show you a graph here which shows that the top 20 countries in the world spend around 10% of their income on foodstuffs. So even if the price of food doubled or tripled, it's not going to be a death sentence for a lot of people. Now, I say that very, very tongue-in-cheek because I know that there's a lot of people who do live below the poverty line, and for those people, that sort of food price increase could potentially lead to catastrophic outcomes. However, half the countries in the world have populations who spend anywhere from 30 to 50% of their incomes on food. The majority of the money that they have goes towards feeding themselves. And if the price of food doubles here, it's going to more than double in those countries, especially the ones that are importer nations. Because we live in such a tight-knit, globalized world, there will be spillover effects as a result of that. When the price of food doubles in developing countries, particularly those who've had a taste of modernity, they're not just going to sit on the sidelines and get bloated guts and just wait to die. That's not how it's going to go down. There's going to be civil unrest. There could potentially be civil war. Governments will be toppled. There will be extremist groups that move in to fill the power vacuum. There's going to be spillover in the forms of immigration. And remember that we live in a very tight-knit, globalized world of commerce in which a lot of the stuff, the raw materials that we get to manufacture the commodities that we enjoy are gotten from these countries. So if these countries become destabilized, what do you think is going to happen then? Then you have a whole new license for interventionism, you have war, etc., etc. So instability in these countries as a result of shortages or price increases is going to have an impact on us, whether we like it or not. Now, people from around the world have been sending me some anecdotal evidence of food shortages in the grocery stores in the form of thinner than usual shelves. And there's a lot of shortages right now, and I can attest to this because, as many of you know, I have a store, CanadianPreparedness.com. We have over 1,000 products. We have dozens of distributors from around the world, and I can definitely tell you that half of those distributors are raising their prices, and the other half, they have a shortage right now. So the ones who have product are raising the prices. The ones who don't have any product are just taking pre-bookings for 6 months to to a year down the road. And honestly, I've been hearing 6 months to a year down the road for a lot of these companies, and they just haven't come through on my orders, which tells me that this is definitely pretty serious. Now, there's a variety of reasons why this is happening. This is very complicated, but what you need to know at the end of the day, okay, the thing that is going to push this all over the edge is if there's some new variant that comes out of left field that again forces nations to further restrict the workflow process, go into more, dare I say, lockdowns, and affect global trade even more. That is what could potentially contribute to this becoming an existential food shortage, at least for people in lower income brackets in the developed world. Labor shortages are occurring at the level of raw materials extraction, processing, manufacturing, and the transport of goods to the actual stores. Okay, there's not enough drivers, there's not enough migrant workers to work the fields because of the border issues with respect to the pandemic. You know, nations have closed their borders. This has put a lot of stress on agriculture. The second reason, of course, is the ongoing droughts. Canada experienced a major drought. It caused a drastic reduction in the crop output. The West has, of course, fires, droughts, you name it, all these climate catastrophes that are happening all around the world. Everywhere in the world where we're seeing drought, that's forcing farmers to rely more on irrigation, which is putting more stress on aquifers, more stress on freshwater, rivers, lakes. Now, another potential cause of this is that I think you do have a huge portion of the population which learned their lesson last year and is now trying to prepare themselves for another potentially long, dark winter ahead. You also have congestion at the ports, shipping container prices are through the roof, and lastly, you have the monetary inflation issue. The fact that the currencies of the world that are issued by central banks are just simply worth less and less. So all these factors are creating the perfect storm for what we're seeing right now in the form of rising food prices. And as anecdotal as some of this is, there are countless articles that are talking about these rising food costs and the shortages. However, a lot of these articles are off the beaten path. We're not hearing about this in the mainstream media because, again, if we were, that would only exponentially increase the panic, which would make the problem worse. So as something you may recall, earlier this summer, back in May, when I was warning people of a catastrophic drought ravaging the crops, that I advised you then to load up before the price had gone through the roof on a lot of these basic commodities. Now, there's an article here that says the entire world is short-staffed. Food prices climb as labor shortage crushes the food industry. Whether it's fruit pickers, slaughterhouse workers, truckers, warehouse operators, chefs, or waiters, the global food ecosystem is buckling due to a shortage of staff. Now, even if we were to get a handle on this current crisis here in the developed world, we need to understand that it is going to continue to be a problem in the rest of the world where they don't have access to the same medical interventions, if they even do ultimately work, because apparently there are variants emerging which are very resistant to anything that we can potentially throw at it. But this is going to put food producers in a very interesting predicament. I have another article here. It talks about Sri Lanka targets hoarders, bad traders to tackle food shortages. Okay, the government there is actually confiscating food in order to distribute it and regulate the price, because the price is getting so out of control, is potentially going to cause economic instability. The governments of the world knows this, and Sri Lanka may well be looking into the future. Now, they are a net importer of food. So unlike a lot of developed countries, they're not net exporters like we are. That's not to say that there isn't going to be some government intervention in agriculture in terms of price regulation and how much food can be shipped overseas, etc., etc. It's going to be a very complicated state of affairs. Bringing it closer to home, there's another article here which talks about how food prices are at an all-time high at Ottawa grocery stores. Ottawa is the national capital of Canada, if you didn't know. And there's people who are saying, I've been doing this for over 40 years, never seen so many items go up so quick. The article talks about how the pandemic has caused an unprecedented spike in the price of groceries, the largest in Canada's history. They give an example here. In 2019, tomatoes were $4.99 for a 3-liter basket. Now it's $6.99. Okay, only a 50% price increase. But when you apply that across the board, it starts to become very substantial for people in the lower rungs of the socioeconomic ladder. And remember, if that price is raising 50% here, it's likely raising a lot more in other countries. Meat counter prices rising to spook zone levels, according to Food Expert. Now, this is somewhat the result of chicken and beef being compromised by the lack of feed due to the drought-like conditions. So again, environment impacting our ability to grow and distribute food. Another article here, rats, droughts, and labor shortages eat into the global edible oil recovery. So palm oils, canola oils, all of these oils that we use in our foods, probably some of them which aren't that good for us, nonetheless, definitely having an impact. And with drought tends to come some kind of pestilence. Okay, they've seen that in Australia the year after the flooding. They had that mice infestation. They're seeing locust swarms all around the world, which are devouring crops. So really, if you were a biblical scholar, there probably was no better time to be alive if we're talking 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Another article here, gangs now run Haiti, filling a vacuum left by years of collapse. I was recently watching a video by this channel, which is basically just showing all the different derelict inner city urban areas of the United States. And they were going through some place in Philadelphia, and it looked like something out of a dystopian movie, like somewhere in between the movie Dread and Idiocracy. It was just very depressing to see so many people who are struggling with mental health, addictions, poverty in the United States right now. It looks like a war zone in some places. And this is a sign of what could potentially be coming, because when you do have a descent into lawlessness, you do have power vacuums which are filled by gangs, because authority and law enforcement can't do their job. I can't even imagine the food insecurity that is currently being faced in Haiti right now. And of course, they just had that earthquake as well. So prayers to people in Haiti that they can recover and hopefully retake control of their country once again. Another one here, unprecedented levels of dam building and water extraction by nations on great rivers are leaving countries further downstream increasingly thirsty, increasing the risk of conflicts. The United Nations says that up to 700 million people could be displaced by the year 2030. Think about that for a second. How many people were displaced by the Syrian war? Maybe a couple million? Imagine 100 times that amount being displaced. Okay, and this is assuming that this whole situation that we're in right now resolves itself and doesn't get worse, which is not looking very likely right now. Another one here from the UK, which, if you've been paying attention to the news reports, probably one of the worst food shortage situations in the developed world. Co-op chief says current food shortages are the worst he's ever seen. Staffing problems caused by COVID and Brexit are major problems in the UK food industry. And there's a problem with lorry drivers. They're short-staffed, like 100,000 people or something like that. Another one here, food shortages, supply chain delays put strain on school menus. Essentially what we have here is a perfect storm. We have a shortage of raw ingredients. We have a shortage of people in the workforce. At the same time, everybody needs more of everything. So, like I say, we need to keep this in perspective. It's not the end of the world yet, but times could potentially get very, very difficult if the current crisis persists over the next 6 to 12 months. There's undoubtedly going to be price increases. I talked about that in my last video. If you haven't seen it yet, go and watch it here. There's undoubtedly going to be shortages and things that you are not able to get. But for the 95% of people who watch these videos who are blessed enough not to reside in these countries where existential food security is an issue. This is not doomsday, but that should also not be a reason to get complacent. Now, I would encourage you once again, please go and check out our library of hundreds of videos with practical emergency preparedness tips and go and explore the prepping space a bit more, because everybody who we can help get proactive with preparedness, that's going to be one less drag on the system when things get really bad. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe out there. Stay ready. Canadian Prepper out.